Share. Now, I know it might sound ridiculous, and you might be like a 3-year-old playing with a toy. It's mine. I don't want to share. But let me break it down simply into 3 reasons why sharing would solve the world's problems. First, sharing would completely eradicate poverty and working 9 to 5s because we already have more than enough resources for everyone. And if everyone worked with each other instead of against each other, we would have a thriving community. This is what I call the two people rule. Imagine there were just two people on the entire earth. Now imagine they lived in the same system we have set up now, which is a system of master and slave and hierarchy meant to extract as much energy and resources from people forced to be at the bottom of a hierarchy. One person would be like, hey, we're going to call this a democracy and I represent your interests and you can vote for what you want and I can decide if I want to go through with it. We have basic laws like no one can take from each other. We call that stealing and only I can have the big weapons. Deal? Deal. So one person, we'll call them the master, walks around with nuclear weapons and the other, we'll call them the slave, isn't allowed to make them. And the master says will also have these things called money, and they take a leaf off a tree and a Sharpie and write numbers on them, like 1, 5, 10, 100, 500. And they say, only I can make these. If you make them, I put you in a cage. So they keep the money. They say, I control this land, and if you try to do anything to make this land your own, I'll put you in a cage. And you'll need my consent before you touch any resource on this planet. So you struggle for a while and then decide to ask for your money. They say, I'll give you 5 leaves, but you have to pay me back 10 leaves in the future. So you're like, how would I get 5 more? You spend the money on buying resources the master owns for a tool the master wants and sells it for 15 leaves. Now you pay back the 10 and have 5 left over. But you can't live anywhere without paying a certain amount of leaves for eternity until you die. So the master has successfully and effectively trapped you into a work until you die scheme for them, unless you find some way to eradicate the master, change their mind, or something else. Now, imagine there was no master-slave relationship and it was an egalitarian society, meaning people treated each other like they saw themselves in each other, not as competition to dominate, but as reflections of themselves. And instead of building weapons and rules to terrorize slaves into working for their entire lives, they decided to do what was in the best interest of each other, just as you would do what was in the best interest for yourself. They needed a tool. If someone knew how to make it and had interest in doing so, they made it. If no one wanted to make it, clearly it didn't meet the threshold for what was necessary for the two people. Someone needed food. Well, food grew everywhere. Citrus trees were abundant. Plants grew from the ground that were nutritious. And if it ever ran out or was short, the two decided to divvy it up. Maybe one person needed it more. Maybe one person wanted the joy of seeing the other person eat. Maybe they both needed it badly and they divided it evenly. But no decision was made unilaterally, meaning by one person, made to determine the outcome of who got to eat and who got what resources. And no one claimed any resources other than temporarily, because the two knew that they were only there for a short period of life. And even when they used something, they would return it back to the earth. Now you can see, compared to our master-slave world, how sharing and tangentially eliminating slavery and master's rules would completely eradicate poverty and working 9 to 5s. Second, sharing would eliminate all the unnecessary and bad addictions and drugs and unhealthy habits of society. If people actually had equitable power and shared, no one company could create a monopoly on an industry to create such addictive items that damage the entire world for the sake of owning more resources that they would not share. One major reason this would be is because the huge reason the population creates these huge corporations to get masses of money is to protect themselves from ever having to struggle for a resource in a competitive master-slave world, where the world is ruled by laws, where our world is ruled by laws in countries that create the Hunger Games. The Hunger Games, if y'all have seen it in real life or read it, forcing their populations to fight to the death for resources instead of working together to achieve the uplifting of all. Another reason sharing would eliminate all the unnecessary and bad addictions and drugs and unhealthy habits of society is because it would eliminate the slave laws of copyright, patent, and other predatory rules that prevent the population from creating better versions of bad products. For example, instead of an Instagram that promotes suicide and sex traffics, the population would have the option to use a better version where the people actually prevented those harms and not one person trying to fill the pockets of shareholders, lying to Congress, and dodging questions because they have drowned out any semblance of empathy and allowed evil to overtake their entire lives. Companies wouldn't fight to keep you online and prevent you from sleeping because they wouldn't have anything to lose if you shut off their platform, and they cared for your health because it is no longer a master-slave competition and anti-sharing world, but a world where everybody makes sure everybody else's needs are met to the best of their abilities. Obviously, there is never perfection, but spreading out externalities and harms across more people is a lot better than having one person or group bear the entire burden of harm. That's how you have situations like child wasting and extreme poverty, where people are forced to watch restaurants throw food away and people grow up to have no heart. Word to 21 Savage. Footnote, the tech portion of this speaks to some version of open source, but nothing even close to the type of open source we have now, where people's incentives are still driven by profit and self-preservation instead of community preservation. Survival of the fittest is a Western lie that needs to be drilled out of people's heads, because that is not how any species survives. Literally, even trees share, and that's their way of living. Third and finally, sharing would completely eradicate poverty and working 9-to-5s, because there would be such an abundance for everyone. Look at how much our world produces in the slavery setup we have now. All the nice things just get funneled to a few people. And the problem isn't that everyone can't live in their own castle. It's simply that the way that the rules and the masters built the laws and the fake money out of thin air system are the consequence of being put in a cage by another slave, just as poor and stupid as you prevent everyone from being able to have their own castle to live in, if that's what everyone wanted. There's plenty of space for that in this world. Take a flight or just travel around the world and you'll see that these ideas of overpopulation are simply lies, like terrible lies. I don't even know how they came up with the lie. Just rely on a stupid population to further entrench people into the slavery system, some call capitalism, others call tyranny, and shove people into urban cities and industries to keep all the slaves in one place to feed their masters. And this might be the most important of points of this video, sharing knowledge is probably the most prime resource in knowledge. All knowledge, diverse knowledge, is important. Not the thoughts of one person. It allows true innovation and freedom of living in new ways all over the world. Gone are the days of archaic building regulations and centralized power, and in come the days of decentralized knowledge and power, where every person has the right to self-determine their life and not have to slave until they die to receive fake money leaves back to maybe get access to a nice house and vacation. And that's it. Let me know what you think in the comments. Drop a like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.